Hello everyone, my name's Colton and I'm here to show you day one of Advent of Code for Java. So we're going to be kind of going over what the problem is, which is trebuchet, and then we're going to kind of code out the Java solution for part one, and then there will be also a part two. So anyway, we'll just go ahead and get right into it. We're kind of talking about trebuchet here. There's an elf and they're trying to launch you or something. Anyway, there's some calibration input file to launch you in the correct place. And so, I mean, you can go ahead and skip over a lot of this text, but where the real problem comes in here is the newly approved calibration document consists of lines of text. Each line originally contains a specific calibration value that the elves now need to recover. Right off the bat, it's already kind of sounding a little complicated, and you might kind of become a little discouraged at this point because you're hearing like calibration value and all this other stuff. It's actually not that bad. Every line is a calibration value that the elves need to recover. And on each line, the calibration value can be found by combining the first digit and the last digit, and it must be in that order to form a single two-digit number here. So if we have here, for example, this is a 1, so it goes 1 ABC 2. That's going to end up as a 12 because we combine the first digit, which is a 1, and the last digit, which is a 2, and then we get 12. In here, same thing. You get a 3 and then an 8, and then here's a 1 and a 5, and then over here in trebuchet, we have just a single character, which is a 7, so it is both the first digit and the last digit in the string. And so here we go, and then at the end, you need to sum up all of those numbers, and it produces 142. So it says, consider your entire calibration document. What is the sum of all the calibration values? And here you can see my answer, and I've already completed this, but let's go ahead and try solving this again. So over here in IntelliJ, we're going to go ahead and start. So it doesn't really matter what your class name is. There is no object-oriented things we need to mess with over in this Advent of Code day one. I don't know if you really ever have to use any OOP concepts, but really just name it whatever you want. Just as long as the public class and the file name match up, you should be good. And so we're going to enter in over on main. So we need to first read in everything from the file. So if you've downloaded the file, you can just go ahead and put it in over here. And so we open up input.txt. We see that we have about 1,000 lines of code, or not code, but necessarily more like a just random strings of text with a couple digits sprinkled throughout the text. And if you see some actual numbers in there spelled out, that is just a precursor to part two, but again, that will be separate. So anyway, over here in CKMB, blah, 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 the first digit will be a 5, and then the first digit, or technically the last digit, will be a 7. And so in the end, it should be 57. That would be added to our total sum, but we're not quite there yet. So first off, let's go ahead and create an array list that's going to hold in all of the lines of the file. So if we have array list that's going to hold going to hold strings, and let's call it lines is equal to new array list. And then from here, we're just going to go ahead and read in every single line from the file. So we're going to use a try with resources statement saying buffered reader, br equals new buffered reader, and then we're going to give it a new file reader. And then we're just going to pass in the file name. So if we just go over here and then right click and do copy path reference and do it from the content root and then paste it here, we should be good. And so now we'll open up the braces. We'll do a quick catch statement of just IO exception, pretty general. In real programs, you should actually probably check for other kinds of exceptions, but for now, IO exception or just exception is good enough. So now that we have created this try with resources statement, which is saying, hey, you can reference BR, the buffered reader, and once we're out of the try catch or if anything goes wrong, we'll automatically close the resources for you. So that's just the basics of a try with resources statement. And so now we're going to read in each line. So we'll create a string line is equal to br.readLine. And right here, it's just containing the very first line in input.txt. But now we need to loop over everything that we're about to go through. So we'll say while line is not equal to null, we're going to go ahead and append this to the lines array list. So we'll say lines.append, add line. And then we need to update line. So we'll say line is equal to br.readLine. And then we're done. So this right here, just this chunk of code, we'll go ahead and read in every single line from input.txt. And just to go ahead and prove it real quick, we'll just do a quick print statement and say print lines.get 0 just to make sure everything is working. And so we get this CKMB and we're good. So now that we've read in all the lines from the file, we now need to find the first digit of every single line and also its last digit. So we're going to create a for each loop here to iterate over every single line in the array list. So for string line, which is in lines. And as you can see here, we have another string line. If this kind of confuses you, it's because of scope. So over here, this string line exists within the try catch statement. And in fact, it actually only exists within this scope particularly. So we can go ahead and have another string line here that is completely separated from the one on line 12. So over here, string line, which is just going to represent each code or every line, we now need to iterate through it and find the first digit. So we'll just say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than line.length, or line.length, I++. And so this is just going through every character in the string. So we'll say, or actually we could have just another enhanced for each loop here. So instead of doing that, let's just do for char c, which is in line.toChar array. So what we're saying is there's going to be a character c throughout the line that we're looking through, and we have to convert this line into a character array. So really we're just iterating through a char array. And so we'll say if character dot is digit, and then we'll pass in c. That means that, hey, we found a digit, now we need to do something about it. So over here, we'll actually go ahead and create a string first number, which is going to be set to an empty string, and then a string second number, which is just going to be set to an empty string also. And so over here, if we look at this again, so we just checked if the current character that we're looking at in the line is a digit. And if so, we can go ahead and put that into our first number variable. So we'll go ahead and say first number is equal to string, or really, can we just set it to c? No, we cannot. So we need to do string dot value of c. And so we take the character, put it in the string. Again, there are more efficient ways of doing this, but we'll kind of optimize everything in part 2. So now that it's been stuck in first number, we need to go ahead and break out of this so we don't keep on trying to find other digits in here, because there could be 10 digits or so, but really we only care about finding the last one after we have performed this operation. So we'll go ahead and put a break, and then we're good. Now, what we need to do is, instead of using a for each loop, because the for each iterates, from like 0 to n-1, we can't necessarily do that with a, when we're trying to like reverse, we can't decrement the for each. So instead we're just going to use a basic for loop here. So for int I is equal to line.length, and we have to say -1 because we need to start at n-1 for indexing purposes. And then I must be greater than or equal to 0. And then we're going to decrement I. And then we just go ahead and do a very similar check here. So we'll say if line.char at I, and then we can go ahead and take this and we'll say if character dot is digit. And so when we pass in the character that we get here, then we just open up the brace and we'll say second number is equal to line.char at I. and then again, need to break, and then we're good. And since this is a character, we need to wrap it with a string dot value. And I don't know what I accidentally did. So string dot value of this character. And so now we have our first digit and our second digit, and it might behoove us to say first digit instead of number. And we'll go ahead and change that here. First digit. And then we'll actually just go ahead and refactor this one right here. And then call it a second digit. And so now the first digit and the second digit have been found. Now let's just combine them. So over here we have we're still within our for each loop, which is iterating over every line in the file. Right here we can just say int calibration value, since that's what we're talking about really, is equal to integer dot parse int, and then now we're just going to concatenate the first digit and the second digit. We'll just say first digit plus second digit, and that's good enough. And remember, since these are strings, they're not actually adding these together. So let's go ahead and print out all the calibration values to make sure that we're doing something correct. So let's run it, and let's go all the way to the top just to see what's going on. So we have 57 and then 61. So now let's cross-check this. So our first digit here is a 5, and our last digit is a 7. Over here, the first digit is a 6, and the last digit is a 1. Now the number doesn't necessarily need to be at the end of the string, so let's go all the way to the bottom, and let's check the second to last one and see if we got an 88. So all the way down here, and the second to last one is indeed an 88. So now that we have read in this correctly, we just need to create a sum, or more like a running sum. So over here, we'll go ahead and say int sum of cal values, just to be a little descriptive, is equal to 0. And then once we go down here, we'll actually say sum of cal values, which is plus equal to the calibration value that we just found. And then once we exit out of this big for each loop, we'll just print out to the user, or really us, and let's make sure that this is outside the for loop. Yep. We'll go ahead and say, using a printf statement, the sum of values is, and then %d, because we're working with a whole number, and also just make sure to add in a % in there, and then we'll just say sum of cal values. And so now let's go ahead and run this, and we get the sum of values is 53,386. And so let's go check what I put in over on Advent of Code, and indeed it was 53,386. All right, so that's going to go ahead and conclude part 1 of day 1 Advent of Code. Thank you for sticking around, and in part 2 we're going to go ahead and optimize everything and tackle the part 2 problem.